Is it possible that people can channel information, perhaps information that is resting in some ether world? I don't know how to describe it. I guess Carl Jung would call it a collective consciousness. Famous American psychic Edgar Cayce might call it Akashic records. The point is that though so many people believe in this idea that the consciousness can, in its essence, pick up like an antenna information that is beyond their senses, rarely do we get the opportunity to prove it. And I honestly believe, ladies and gentlemen, that today I have something that is as close as, I don't know how else this could be proven, but certainly this indicates a possibility that it's absolutely mind-blowing, to say the least. So if you're interested in knowing what I'm talking about exactly, please stay tuned. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this one it's one of, I don't know if it's going to be one of my best episodes, but it's certainly one of the most interesting episodes that I've ever had. Usually we talk about UFOs, we talk about aliens, but today we're going to talk about the powers of the mind, essentially. So many of you might know that I was a SAG actor at one point. I worked as a cinematographer, as an editor, and as a color corrector. So I had some experience in film before producing my own YouTube channel. And I would have these regular meetings with these filmmakers. And it was something that we had like every week where we'd talk about different stories and we'd have to write our own scripts. And so there was this one moment that I was kind of late. I had to write the script in less than 10 minutes. It wasn't like a full script. It was just like trying to kind of outline the story with a few lines here and there. And my mind just kind of opened up in ways that would have probably never happened if not for this unbelievable time constraint pressure that I was experiencing. And what I'm about to say is absolutely 100% truthful. Right after I wrote that script, I literally turned to my friend and I said, "Bro, I swear to God, I channeled that shit." I'm not even kidding. Those are the exact words that I used. I literally told them right after writing this thing that I channeled the short film. 5 years later, a film comes out called The Age of Adaline that in unbelievable ways matched my short film idea or the outline that I had. And you might be thinking, oh, come on, man, how many stories are similar to each other? I mean, you're just reaching here. Well, first of all, there's very unique qualities about the film that you usually don't see in most stories that are actually present in the short film that I had. But most shocking of all of the coincidences is that whereas that romantic film is called The Age of Adaline, my short film outline, which I had literally told my friend I think I channeled this shit, was called Adaline's Lover. I kid you not. I hardly even knew what the name Adaline was. I don't know why I even used that name. It was just something that was so random to call it that, or even call the character that name. And so I found it really interesting when I looked at the movie, The Age of Adaline, and I'm going to show you some plot points, some trailers to really hone in this point and how the two stories are very similar. So even though the film came out 5 years later, they started casting the film on May 12th, 2010. I think Katherine Heigl was originally considered for being the main character. What do I mean by being able to prove that channeling is real? Well, let me show you what's happening here. If you go to my Gmail account, look at this. Adaline's Lover, written when? January 12th, 2010. May 12th, 2010 is when they started casting. The film was written in January 12th, 2010, the short film Adaline's Lover. It was written exactly 4 months before. So my assumption is that the script had already been developed and that somehow in this very time-consumed pressure situation, I actually ended up picking up pieces of what the film was about. Though the way that the characters interact with each other is a little bit differently, some of the structural elements are unbelievably similar. So I guess the best way to do this is just to show it to you, ladies and gentlemen. But first of all, let's talk about the plot real quick. Age of Adaline is basically about a woman who gets in a car crash and ends up dying. But at the same time that she dies, she inadvertently gets struck by lightning. And this happened 10 months after her husband had died. So she was a widow who then died on a car crash, got struck by lightning, and was revived by this lightning, but could no longer age. So though she was alive, she was unable to go on with her life, meaning she can't age. She's effectively stuck in a state of purgatory. She ends up eventually meeting the son of the man that she used to love before she died and had been revived. The story is about her kind of like keeping a secret from the dad of the kid that she's falling in love with. And the movie essentially ends with the very same thing that happened, which she gets in a car crash again, gets defibrillated with a form of electricity, I guess a form of lightning you can call it. And then after that, she's able to age. So the story that I have here, Adeline's Lover, let me just click it real quick. Well, this is about a man who had killed himself, just like in the Age of Adaline, how she was a widow. Well, this man essentially killed himself, but he didn't know he had killed himself and was effectively stuck in a state of purgatory, though he didn't know that he was in purgatory. So he, in a way, you could say that this man could not age. In the whole short film is him essentially trying to figure out this state that he's in, this weird state of suspension, and it culminates, kid you not, a car crash, just like the movie, with a woman named Adaline. Well, let me just show you the trailer, and I'll show you the parts of the short film and show you how similar some of these things are. So here is the trailer for The Age of Adaline.
Adaline Marie Bowman was born on January 1st, 1908.
So I'm going to pause it to kind of showcase you. So my short film literally starts with everything looks desaturated but washed out with whites. Okay, so let's keep playing.
Many years later, she would begin a family of her own. On a cold winter night in 1935, Adeline's life would change forever.
So there's the car crash in the short film. As you see, eventually when the man is figuring out that he's kind of in a state of purgatory, as it says here, he's hurled out of his dream state and into a parking lot where he stands near a crashed car holding a girl in his arms, this girl being Adaline. She looks dead. He's crying hysterically.
In that moment, something incredible happened. Its effect.
So she gets hit by lightning. There's a moment in the very beginning of the short film where the man is trying to figure out who he is, and he sees a reflection of himself but doesn't know that it is himself. And check this out. And the protagonist is hurled into a state of light and energy that surrounds him. This happens in the very beginning, just like Adaline is hit by lightning.
It was almost magical. Henceforth be immune to the ravages of time. She will never age another day.
I'd like to ask you a few questions, Miss Bowman.
The next time we see each other, we'll have a new identity. I'll always be your mother. You'll always be my daughter. Happy birthday, Mama.
You look exactly like this old friend of mine. We were very close.
And if you saw Harrison Ford earlier, let me just kind of rewind for a second.
Exactly like this old friend of mine.
He says he looks exactly like this old friend of mine. This whole identity shifts. This is kind of written structurally in the short film in the sense that the guy keeps seeing reflections of himself and is unable to determine what that reflection is, essentially. In fact, there's even a line where he says here, I know you from somewhere, and then his own reflection says, or sometime do you remember me? I do, but who are you? So that's kind of reminiscent of that scene with Harrison Ford.
You look exactly like this old friend of mine. We were very close.
Don't you miss having someone to love? It's not the same when there's no growing old together. Without that love is just heartbreak.
I'm Alice. Pleasure to meet you. I'll just wait with you.
Thank you. I'll manage.
Wait! How do we get in touch? First time I saw you, I knew I had to meet you. I didn't know when or how, but I knew I would.
How is this possible? All these years, you've lived, but you've never had a life.
I don't know how. Tell me something I can hold on to forever and never let go.
Let go.
There's a car crash again.
Adeline!
I don't know how to stop.
Okay, so to make this point more clear, I guess I have to show you some scenes and then kind of show you some of the lines, because I was already shocked before, but when I kind of reviewed some of these scenes, it got me even more surprised. So this is when Harrison Ford, he knew her when she was, the same age, but, many years before. And this is the first moment that he recognizes her. So let me just play it real quick and show you how similar some of these elements are.
It's a ladybug.
So he touches her head
Say their good luck. Did you get it?
and then sees the scar in her hand.
Thank you.
And this becomes his moment of realization that she is,
Please tell
or
us.
she seems like the same woman that he thought it was, that, she looks so similar, but how is this possible? But then he sees the scar and he's like, oh my gosh. So recall that he touches her forehead first with the ladybug, and then suddenly has this realization. And now check out what happens in the short film. The man points a finger to the forehead of the guy, which is his own reflection. He enters a region where he's suddenly watching multiple reflections of himself separating from a single origin and fulfilling all these potential thoughts and actions that would pass the mind of the protagonist. So the most important thing here is that he's watching reflections of himself separating from a single origin. This is the moment that the father realizes that she is the same person that is dating his son right after he touches her forehead. And this is something that happened a long time ago when they were in love with each other. So as you see, she had cut her hand at a certain point. Now, in this very short film that I have, remember that she's a widow, so both her husband and her had died. And in this particular short film, the guy was in a state of purgatory, and Adaline, his lover, had died beforehand. And he eventually ends up committing suicide, though he doesn't know that he committed suicide, by cutting his own hand. And it says here, this is only a page and a half long. This is kind of like more of like an outline with a few lines, but it has so many elements that are unbelievably similar. So it says here, you see him with a knife in the bathroom, painfully rehearsing the kill shots. Like a knife slipping through butter, the protagonist witnesses himself slipping out of consciousness, blood oozing everywhere. So I know it's not exactly the same, but what's interesting is whatever it is that reminds him of her is essentially this cut in her hand. And the protagonist, who is in a state of purgatory, the moment that he kind of starts waking up and realizing what's happening to him, he starts remembering the moment of death, which is when he cut his own hand. But there are other elements that are even more similar than that. Let me show you what's going on here. Okay, so let's just play this and I can explain this later. 1 second.
If I had, it would have been Alice.
If I had told anybody, is what she's saying.
Don't run away. Don't disappear again, please. For Alice.
So he says that please don't run away, don't disappear again for Ellis, but in a way he's kind of saying about himself. And this character who's looking at reflections of himself in a state of purgatory, as it says here, he's hurled into this zone of absolute darkness. It looks like a state of purgatory. Well, look what he says to Adaline. Please stay with me. I can't lose you. I never told you this before, but I love you, Adaline. You can't leave now. I've only just found you. I've only just found you. The same kind of state that Harrison is facing because he was falling in love with her and she left very early on in the relationship. Okay, let's play on.
Adeline. All these years, you've lived, but you've never had a life.
So that's another way of saying that she's in a state of purgatory, just as I showed you with the line on the short film that he's in a state of purgatory.
Free yourself for Alice. Stay, Adeline.
I don't know how.
Adeline.
Okay, and then she runs away. So let me show you this one other scene because once again, it's just some unbelievable coincidences. So this is the second car crash. So the film starts with a car crash. She gets electrocuted, doesn't age, and then at the very end, she gets hit again, and then they do the defibrillator on her, and then afterwards, after she's brought back to life again, she's able to age. Okay, so look at the scene, like with all the fog, and the tow truck is coming in there right after the car crash, right? And so here's what's written in the short film, just to highlight this point. This is kind of cool. It's let me show you here. He begins surveying the area only to see fog-like reflections of his past. So you saw how it was kind of foggy. He sees the car crash. He sees Adaline taking her last breath. Let's play on. And so right after this, they kind of go into this cool little montage moments. And yeah, I'll just stop talking.
The moon is responsible for much of what takes place on the surface of the Earth. A stray meteor hit the moon in 1178. The resulting concussion would cause extreme tides on every lunar phase in Tierra del Fuego, Argentina. A 23% rise in the mean tide on this night produced a storm 2,000 miles off the Pacific coast, causing an increase in the amount of molecular ionization in the atmosphere. And for the first time in 78 years, snow fell in this part of Sonoma County. In the first stages of hypothermia, the body will try to generate heat through shivering. When this fails, it will decrease the flow of blood to the extremities. Metabolism slows to a crawl. You're dying, but you don't know it. In the final stages, the victim breathes only once or twice a minute of suspended animation.
It's kind of like that line, like where it says, like she's taking her last breath. So then he goes there and sees the actual car crash, just like the character who is, in a sense, facing his own reflections, and then comes across that scene where he's like, please stay with me, I can't lose you. And this is happening after the car crash. He's hurled into a state of dream state into a parking lot where he stands near a crashed car holding a girl in his arms. She looks dead. He's crying hysterically.
Jenny!
At 10:07 p.m., Adeline Bowman's core temperature had dropped to 87 degrees. Her heart stopped beating.
Okay, so if you remember at the beginning of this, I want to show you this scene because it says,
A stray meteor hit the moon in 1178.
so he starts talking about the stray meteor and the connection with the tidal forces and how snow fell for the first time in Sonoma County. And so in a way, he's talking about a cosmic connection, how everything is connected with each other. In the very end of this short film, when the guy realizes that he's in a state of purgatory after finding Adeline in this car crash, he says, "You are me, I am me. I'm neither a lover, a brother, or a son. I am everything that I choose to perceive, that I choose to believe, that I choose to be." This is his big realization, and it's also this cosmic connection of how everything that is his existence, whether it's this character that he's facing that's his own reflection, that all of this essentially is all connected into this oneness, and it just kind of had a feeling of this moment too, where the guy starts talking about the cosmic connection with everything. It's so strange, And so there she is taking her last breath, and just as it says here. So we went over this line, but just to kind of reiterate, he sees the car crash, he sees Adeline taking her last breath. I mean, look at this. He's literally looking at her taking her last breath. So she's alive, and he's meeting up with her once again.
I know why you ran away.
You do?
It's because of what I said to you last night, isn't it? I told you I loved you. And you got scared. I shouldn't have been so...
So he says, I told you I love you, and they kiss again. As I was saying earlier, he was saying, I love you, Adeline, during the car crash. Please stay with me. And then the very end, the blackness suddenly dissipates back into a beach scene. He begins walking to the guy on the beach, which is his own reflection, only to see that it's actually Adeline. She meets him halfway, and they clutch each other for the final time. Just like the final moment of this movie, that they're kind of clutching each other and having their love with each other. So just to kind of like go back, this movie was written in, I don't know when it was written, but the script was already out by the time I had mid-casting at the time. Obviously, I would have no access to the actual script itself. And so this is the story that I came out with right after I told my friend, yo, dude, I literally think I channeled that shit. I actually said that, and I've never said that about any other script that I've ever written. That is true. I've never said, yo, I think I channeled that shit. And the proof, as I was, explaining earlier, is that this short film, as you see in this Gmail account, was written January 12th, 2010. I mean, literally 5 years before that movie came out. Now, I understand that the characters were kind of mixed up and it wasn't all perfect, but in terms of an outline, the amount of similar motifs that were present in that short script, And the motifs that I noticed in the film, I thought they were incredibly similar, not to mention the title, Adeline's Lover and the Age of Adaline, which is, I mean, given the fact that the father and the son was in love with her, they could have called it Adeline's Lover. But look, I'm not claiming to be psychic. I'm not saying that this happens often. This was kind of like a one in a lifetime occasion that to me was kind of like, yo, I think channeling is possible. I think somehow we pick up little pieces of information from the ether when our minds are open, when we are kind of subject to allow this information to come into us. What interested me the most about this connection, this very unique plot mechanism that the entire story revolves around, which is that Adeline is essentially stuck in a state of purgatory, that she is in the state of not being able to age, and that the main character protagonist of the short film Outline is in a state of purgatory. I mean, literally, after he died, he was in a state of purgatory only to find Adeline in a car crash and then realizing that he had effectively killed himself because his love of his life had died. So I know there's going to be some people who are going to maybe doubt this idea, but I just want to show you that maybe it's possible to kind of, if not prove, highly suggest that channeling is real, that people can do this stuff. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, if you have your own stories regarding channeling that you would like to share, please contact me at eafiles.contact@gmail.com. And as always, thank you for joining me. This is Felipe speaking, signing out.